Hey, Jake. Hello. Thanks for being here today. We're going to answer some of your questions. We're going to review your most recent cross country flight and see if we can't pave the way for you to keep progressing this season. So, why don't you take it away? Let me know what you would like me to focus on today.
Right on. Thanks, man. I appreciate your help on this and helping me grow as a pilot.
Yeah, buddy.
This was my second time flying Mount Diablo, which is one of the big boy launches here in the Bay Area. And basically, we're launching from some of the highest terrain in the Bay Area and then pushing out into the Central Valley, which is pure flatland flying, as one might assume. It was a really cloudy day, not super tall. Just off the bat, had a pretty poor time to launch and almost sunk out immediately. Had a really good low save, and then push towards the valley. And once I hit the valley, I just didn't really know what to do with myself. I'm so used to flying in the hills that once I was in the valley, I wasn't sure what to look for in terms of what side of the cloud to be on or what to look for in terms of triggers. Likewise, the wind picked up considerably throughout the day, and it seems like that's a pretty common thing when you're flying in a big valley. So getting more input on when to call it quits and when to use that to your advantage is would be some good tips too.
Okay, great. Okay, so you had a poorly timed launch and you almost
Mm-hmm.
sunk out. You had to make a low save, which it seems like most big cross country flights are kind of like that. It's like, gonna make it, especially from here at Pine Mountain. It's like everything's a low save off the start. And then as you got into the flats, as you said, you didn't know what to do with yourself. So maybe some flatland flying technique and kind of
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to do there, and flatland versus terrain. And also, you mentioned some things about which side of the cloud, how to connect to the clouds. Like, how do I get there? Obviously, like we want to be at the clouds. How do I get there? How
Mm-hmm.
do I know when I'm close? And how do I get there? And then how do I stay connected to it? And then the other thing was the wind picked up through the day, which is common in most XC flights, right? Like you have no wind in the morning and then in the evening it glasses off. So it's like you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
increasing wind throughout the day. So how much is too much and how to use it to your advantage and when to call it quits,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. Love this. Let's go into your track log here. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to play your track log. To begin with, I'm going to do a little bit of dissection on just your track log itself, like your turn radius and
Mm-hmm.
your thermaling technique and your gliding technique. And then we're going to get into the more details about the questions that you just brought up.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. We're going to look at the Sports Track Live here. Shout out to Cedric, Sports Track Live guy. Okay, Steamy Rindini.
That's
Love your
me.
handle. Okay, and you got Jay Warsnop one. Okay, so you've got some flying buddies. Okay, so let's push play, and we are going to see the start of this poorly timed launch. Obviously, not totally sinking out, but not climbing. Oop, oh, couple up, oh, up, some zigzags. Going down. Oop, little turn. Oh, does he have it? He's got it. Oop, no, yep. Does he have it? He's got it. He's got it. He's got it. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, nicely done. Okay, let's look at this actually. Um, so a super helpful thing to be able to see the track log in 3D is we can look back and we can see, okay, I was turning, but was I climbing? This is the crux for all of us. The Our instinct is to turn because we really want to go up. And sometimes we turn in this, I would call this zeros, right? Like you found some zeros and you made your first turn. It's not a terrible idea. You make 3, 4, 5 turns. And if we look at them from above, they were drifting a little bit and they
Mm-hmm.
were mostly concentric. So I would say you get a B plus on those first 4 turns, like carving. You're carving, and we can tell that you're carving because your circles are nicely concentric. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then you also, when you decide that you don't want to continue turning, you fly directly over your track log where you were in lift, whether it
Hmm.
was light or not, which is a good idea. I recommend that. Okay. So you get a B plus for that as well. Okay. Then you kind of go back a couple of changes in turn direction here. That kind of happens when you're looking for it. So I'm not going to fault you too much for that. Don't look at my track logs. Um, and then you make this one turn here where you're kind of going flat. It's really not working. So you make a big sweeping downwind turn so that you can test it downwind, and it seemed to work for you. You also notice that these next turns are in a lot more wind. They're drifting more because you can see the curly cues are being pulled apart. Okay. You don't get a ton, but here you're back to 830 meters. So you're about 100 feet shy of launch. So let's keep playing. You keep searching around. Here, you're kind of going back and forth. You kind of probably could have avoided that, just straighten that track log out. But
Hmm.
you also have flown here before, I take it?
This is my second time,
Okay. All right.
but I saw people climbing over that earlier, so I figured it was worth a try.
Okay. So you're kind of like got a house thermal vibe here, and you kind of push
Yeah.
out back to where you were, and that's actually where you end up finding it again. There it
Hmm.
is. Okay. So interesting to note that you actually catch the thermal off the same exact trigger both times.
Hmm.
You see that? And then the times that you were out of it, you were downwind of it. You were too close to the terrain. Okay. That might not always be the case there, but it is often the case for people who, like our emotional instinct when we're sinking out is to hug the terrain. Like we want to soar up, like stick to the terrain, right? But actually, we actually need to push out away from the terrain so that we can find the thermals that are standing up and climbing. Okay. So based on your graph down here, I can tell that you're about to climb out. And sure enough, Jake's climbing out. Let's take a look at this track log here before you go on glide. How's it look? Looks pretty good. We just went subterranean there. Um, it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Pretty,
yeah,
pretty.
I'd say I stuck in the core of that one pretty well.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you another B plus right there, bud. Well done. Um, yeah, you go out of it and you're still going up, but maybe you saw something or maybe it was time to go on glide. Either way, your glide path so far is looking pretty nice and straight. Oh, yeah, you've got somebody. Oh, I see what's happening here. It's
Hmm.
cool that it overlays the track together. So basically, what you saw was that you were climbing, and then you saw your buddy who was absolutely banging out. And so you ran over towards the other climb. And sure enough, you don't totally get it. But he's on glide. You're right behind him.
Hmm.
Who is your buddy here?
There was actually 45 people flying that day, the most that's
Oh,
ever flown that site.
okay.
So I know of his
Sick.
name, but I don't know him personally.
Okay, got it. Okay, so now am I correct in assuming you see this person? You guys are team flying.
Yeah,
You're following him. Okay, great.
right. Yeah, I'm chasing him.
Okay, here
And that was a
something
little lower here than I would have liked. So I saw the sun was hitting that mountainside right below me
Uh-huh.
very well. So I knew there had to be something there.
Okay. Ooh. Okay, you actually lose you get C minus for this. Actually, it might this little curly Q right here might be a failing grade. So this is actually what this is psychological projection. Pure and simple here, Jake.
Mhm.
Um Often we will get to a place where we are like, oh my God, it's windward, it's baking in the sun, it's this huge face. So you fly over it and you start turning. But what's the rule? You turn when it beeps.
Right.
If it doesn't beep, you don't turn. Here, it didn't beep and you were turning. You're like, it's got to be right here where I expect it to be. But sure enough, it's not there. But you go a little bit further, you go a little bit
Mhm.
further back, right? All of these curly cues, do, 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 you can eliminate those. Okay. And the way that you would eliminate those is by understanding that your track log is going to go from the hot thing that you think is going to fire directly to the next hot thing that you're going to think is going to fire, directly to
Mhm.
the next hot thing that you think is going to fire, right? Once you get over it, don't look down at it, don't stare at it and justify yourself that oh no, it is going to work. There are times, and this is a bit more nuanced and this is difficult. Like if you can keep gliding, right? If you don't fly into any bump, if you don't fly into zeros, if you get some signs like birds, dust devil, other pilots climbing, okay, there might be a reason for you to stick around and do some turns.
Hmm.
But in general, the rule of turn when it beeps is turn when it beeps. So if it's not beeping, don't turn. Your buddy has a climb here. Where is he? He's higher than you, and he's also over the back, right? He's over the back of you. So you were like literally directly over the object that you thought was going to fire, right? But remember that thermals can drift in the wind and they have their own inertia. So even though it seems like based on your track log that you were actually right, that the object that you thought was going to fire off actually did produce a big thermal that you catch, but it was further downwind than you thought, right? So if you look at it from the
Hmm.
top, it kind of makes sense from here that where you grab this first turn, it's actually drifting there from that brown face and it's coming this way, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
that makes a lot of sense. I really like that. When you said that thermals have inertia, that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah. So they're going the way that they're going. And they also like it probably came off of right where you thought it was coming off.
Hmm.
It just had a different path than you assumed. So
Yeah, yeah.
don't insist that you know where it's going to go. Keep flying, straighten that track log out, right?
Hmm.
Because you could sit here and circle until the cows come home. And if it's not there, it's not there. But you climb out. And it's interesting here because as you climb, you're actually climbing on glide here. Like you're going, I don't know. The thing, if I were to give you a tip there, I would say scratch high. But also, it seemed like your friend was gliding, so it's like you're better off gliding with your friend than taking two more turns, getting 100 meters, and then being alone on the next glide.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So when you say scratch high, you just mean use the entire thermal, get to the very top of it.
Yeah. So the rule typically is that you stay in the thermal until the thermal strength becomes what you entered it at. So if you fly in and you
Mm.
find yourself in a 2.5, that turns into a 3.5, that turns into a 4.5, and then at the top it starts getting to a 3, and then a 2.5. At a 2.5, you leave. Okay. If
Hmm.
the day is light and you come into it at a 1 and it turns into a 2.5, and then it starts weakening and it turns into a 1 again, then you leave. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. That's
That's a good
just the
rule of
general
thumb.
rule. That's the rule of thumb. Okay, so it seems like you are on a different glide path than Homeboy. A couple little curly cues here that we really want to
Yeah.
straighten this track log out, okay? Because these curly cues, you have to remember that big thermals, the ones that you really want to ride, they're not going to be right next to each other. They don't live next door to each other, right?
Mhm.
Right? The great oaks don't live in each other's shade, right? Trees need big space. Big trees need big space. So do big thermals. Big thermals need big space. You're not going to find one climb right next to another. So that means that expect you're going to have to glide as far as you have, right? Sometimes you fly cross country and you realize, oh my God, how does this work? It's just so perfect. I take it to the top and then I glide, and almost at the bottom of the glide, I find another climb and then rinse and repeat, right? So expect that you're going to glide. And you would almost expect, especially on a day like this in Central California, if the cloud base is not really high, that you might feel low as you catch every climb. Okay. So just straighten that track log out, stay on the bar, control your pitch, glide efficiently, have your elbows behind the risers, tuck your head in, have a sip of water, take a piss, let it go, because you're either going to glide as far as you can and land safely, or you're going to glide as far as you can, catch a climb, and then rinse and repeat, right? So
Yeah.
there's this emotional game that's happening as we glide, which is like, oh, I'm getting lower, I'm getting lower. Fuck, I need to do something. I need to turn circles and stay right here as I just go to the ground. Um, Stay on that glide, glide efficiently, have faith, keep smiling. You're still paragliding and you're not at work. Okay, nice. So you started at broad circles, right? You started at broad
Hmm.
circles and you found your way into it. It's a light one and you keep with it. Not bad. Not bad. I wonder if there was more there. If there was 100 pilots there, it would have been very obvious what happened, but you took what you had. Okay, so now you're kind of getting out into the flats here. And You kind of have some drunken sailor Uber driver going on, right? You're going left and right here. So
Yep.
let's watch this glide one more time. So when you're starting to veer left and right, are you looking at the terrain and thinking, oh, maybe it's going to be this hill? Oh, maybe it's going to be this hill?
Honestly, it was indecision that I had at that point because nobody was following the line I was following, but I could see that pilot to my right, and I could see dozens of my pilots to my left towards the Central Valley,
Oh, really?
and I couldn't decide which ones I wanted to be with.
Aha.
And eventually, I
Yes.
decided I didn't want to be with the guy over that reservoir over there because it just seemed like a long walk out. And the people
Ah,
over the Central Valley were all on really hot winds, and I knew there was no chance in hell I was going to catch up to them.
interesting. Interesting. This is a social dynamic, and also like
Mm-hmm.
you're as you share, it really helps show that XC mindset has so many layers, right? Oh, it's a long
Mm-hmm.
walk out. Oh, it's though they're too fast for me, right? Very interesting. Um, I think in general, Jake, you're a savage and can take a long walk out. So you have a relatively lightweight kit. You're flying a BV1 and a Rush, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay, so it's not a huge kit. Put some trekking poles in there, tie your shoes, have a snack in that thing, and under 10 miles, like, yeah, you should be able to do 10 miles in 3 hours. And that way, I guess what I'm trying to say here is I want you to be unimpeded to fly the best line. Okay. Flying the best
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
My guess is that the best line is over the bigger train here,
Mhm.
right? Do you agree?
Yeah, that would definitely be my instinct.
Okay, I agree. I would fly over the bigger terrain here. But as we're talking about getting out into the valley, this terrain diminishes either way. So it's either going to work in the flats or it's not. And this guy's going to, if he stays on the high terrain, he might fly 5K further than you. But if it doesn't work in the flats, the flight is about to be over either way, right?
Right, right.
Okay, so that's really no harm, no foul. But as you show this zigzagging of what's going to happen, let me remind you that down course line is still optionality, right? Down
What do
course
you mean
line
by
is
that?
still optionality. So if you have two gaggles, if you're in a comp and you have two gaggles, one is on either side of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you turn and go towards the one or the other gaggle as they're flying down course line, now you're actually just like flying to where they were, right? Where
Yeah,
if you know
yeah.
that goal is down course line, everybody's going the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
So you
You're all
must
going to
keep,
converge
you're all
eventually.
going to converge at goal
Yeah,
at the very
yeah.
latest, right? So meaning that you're not looking left or right, you're actually looking down course line. You're trying to vector their trajectory into your trajectory. You're like, okay, the wind is coming from this way. It's like the goal is over there. So this gaggle is going to intersect my line at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is another thing of like the emotional texture of flying cross country is pretty anxious and uncertain, right? So we kind of like we're like, oh, teleport me over there and get me into like the warmth of the whole gaggle, right? Like if I'm
Yeah,
with a
yeah,
hundred pilots, I'm not going to land, right?
yeah.
But we have to like just regulate our nervous systems, calm down, deep breaths, and like look down course line where are we actually going to meet up with this group in a way that is helpful for us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's look at this glide left, right, me, them. No, the other ones. Oh, and he's caught a nice climb here. And this is going to be a long climb looking at your graph. Nice, real productive. Decent little curly cues here. Like the curly cues. Okay, as you start gliding, let's look at this one. It looks pretty good, man. It looks pretty good.
Thanks.
It looks like you leave as it kind of, I guess it softens here at the top. Um,
Yeah, I was also getting really close to cloud base.
oh, really? Okay, so this
Yeah,
is where the cloud base conversation comes in.
yeah.
Talk to me about really close to cloud base, because what I would say is that
Yeah.
clouds, our distance from clouds is actually really hard to tell.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten a taste of that already, but I was at the point where I could see it condensating like right above my head. And that's kind of become a litmus test for me is when you can actually see it condensing above your head. Like that's how you know you're close.
Oh, I love paragliding. Okay. And so describe what you see when you see clouds condensing right above your head.
Usually you could really see it on the edge of the cloud. You can just see
Mhm.
little wispies forming.
Yep. Okay, and what
Like
kind of cloud are we
on
talking? Are we
this
talking
guy.
about a solid wisp? Or are we talking about a really long cloud street? Are we talking about a giant cumulonimbus thunderhead?
It was so I should give more context. At this point in the flight, I started getting a little more nervous because I could see around me, not necessarily in my direct vicinity. I could see some clouds that were taller than they were wide, um, and didn't really look like it was going to develop into a thunder cloud. But they were nice cumulus clouds.
Some juicy
And
ones.
from where I was, everything looked like a cloud street. That's something I learned this day is that when you're in the air, everything looks like a cloud street. You have to kind of look at the shadows to see if it really connects.
Uh-huh. That's a great point.
Um,
Go ahead.
yeah. And yeah, at this point, I just felt like I had plenty of height. And that if I went, 100 meters higher, I think I would have been in a cloud.
Interesting, because as I see here, you're only at 1,200 meters.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1,200 meters. Um, that would be a really low cloud base for the area, no?
hmm Yeah, it
Okay,
was pretty low.
okay, okay.
Maybe I was lower than I thought on this one, but if we look at my graph, I'm gonna get into the thick of it pretty soon.
Okay, great. Let's play. Okay, so notice how straight your oh geez. Notice how straight your track log is when you feel abundant in your altitude. You're like, I feel good about my altitude. I'm going. Right.
Yeah.
And also the other guy to the west has sunk out
Mhm.
and he's landed. So good job not following him there. Because you have outflown the guy. You're like, dang it, should I be on his line? Oh, wait, outflew him. Okay. Oh, damn, this is a ripper.
Yeah, that was pure cloud suck right there.
Okay, well, clouds suck. Interesting. Okay, so you're now at 1,700 meters. You're
hmm
not in the cloud, right?
I was in the cloud, fully in the cloud.
At 1,700 meters.
Yeah,
Okay.
big time.
Okay, tell me
And
about it. Tell me what kind of fully in the cloud.
I wasn't. I wasn't. I mean, I was definitely a little nervous because I've only gone into clouds, a handful of times at this
Mhm.
point. But I could see before I went into the cloud. I noted which direction I thought I could get out of the cloud the fastest, and noted that. And I recently put a compass on my Fly Sky High for that exact reason. And I knew I'd be able to break through the other side of it. So I went on bar to try and get out of it. I didn't even try doing big ears or anything yet, just because I wanted to keep my altitude and get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna fly through the clouds, you might as well take the advantage. Um, did you try to look at the ground?
Um, Not when I was in the cloud, I looked every once in a while to see if I could see out below me.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny you brought that up because, I had one of those 360 cameras going. And in the moment, I was certain that I couldn't see the ground. But when I look back at the footage, I could, for maybe half the time I was in the cloud, I could see the ground, whereas I didn't think I could at the time.
Okay. So this is a couple things. Let's talk about cloud safety in general and also like some of the emotional texture here.
Mhm.
When things are a little bit scary, we tend to get tunnel vision, right?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm in the cloud. This is bad. Okay. Typically, the thinnest part of the cloud is below you, right? Because
Mhm.
you hopefully haven't gone so high into the cloud, right? If you start getting sucked up into the cloud, your glider goes in first, your head goes in second, your butt goes in last, and then what's below your butt is in the thinnest cloud. So often, if you're trying to wisp or take advantage by wisping in a cloud on a cross country flight, then I always look directly below me and I will keep my eyes on what I can see. It helps me hold my bearing. It helps me not get nauseous. Okay. In general, the cloud flying is illegal, but I do lots of illegal shit. It's in gaggle flying and competition flying. It's just unsafe because you can crash into your buddies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this was an especially bad one. Sorry to cut you off, but if you look straight down of where I'm at right now, I had actually also broken airspace and had a sailplane below me. I think a little bit more south.
Okay.
So yeah, I flip around 180 and look down course line.
Okay. And oh yeah, we're
There it
looking at an
is.
airport right here.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is controlled airspace?
Yeah, it's a skydiving airport, and they were also towing up sailplanes that day.
Nice. Okay.
And I almost skirted around the edge. I just barely broke it, but still, I did break it.
Okay. Well, commendable for you to admit it. Um, okay, so about cloud flying. You don't want to do it when there's people close. You don't want to do it like in general, being inside of a cloud, like total white room, absolutely sucks. It's a horrible experience. I learned this the hard way. I thought it would be cool. And I also thought that people were pussies for telling me not to. And so
Mhm.
I let myself go into a cloud here near Pine Mountain. I entered at 12.5. I exited at 14.5. And I thought that I was still in the cloud for some reason. And I realized that my goggles were covered in ice. My hands were covered in ice. I looked up at my glider. My
God.
lines were covered in ice.
Yeah.
And in general, like being in the white room totally sucks. It's nauseating and it's
Hmm.
uncomfortable. It's wet. It's cold. It's just like, it's really not what you want to do. I love flying near the clouds and I like taking advantage on cross country flights. Obviously, I'm trying to fly as far as possible. So I fly towards the edge of the cloud, typically upwind, right? And I keep the 45 rule, which means that you're never more than 45 degrees from an exit. The
Hmm.
thing that you really have to create space for that you can't necessarily see is that the clouds can grow horizontally faster than your glider can fly. So if you let yourself go into a very fast growing cloud, then even though you think you can glide out of it, the cloud is growing horizontally faster than your glider is flying, and you find yourself perpetually in the white room, or at least long enough that you get dizzy, long enough that you get
Yeah.
scared, long enough that you get wet, long enough that you get cold, long enough that you sell your equipment, long enough that you try to spiral out, you panic and try to spiral out and then lose your
Yeah.
fucking bearing and take a huge surge and throw your reserve. And like, these are the videos I've seen lately on YouTube. And I'm like, just
Yeah.
don't do it. Okay.
When
So
you say that the cloud can grow laterally on the sides, even on the upwind side.
I would say so. Yeah. Like that is like, you need to make space for nature being as powerful as it can be. Right. Which growing upwind faster than your glider can fly, definitely like that is totally in the realm of possibility. So the conditions in which you might expect this, like the higher the cloud base, the larger the thermal is between the ground and the cloud that is feeding it. So when you're in Valle de Bravo and cloud base is at 9,000 feet and you're like, right, there's only 3,000 feet between the ground, like you can kind of fuck with those clouds a bit more. When you're here in the Oregon outback and cloud base is at 15,000 feet and there's 12,000 feet between you and the ground, you have to take caution because the thermal that's below you could be feeding that cloud stronger and stronger and stronger by the moment, right?
Mm.
So you have to like the higher the cloud base is, like the more respect that you want to have for it. But obviously looking at the shadows on the ground and seeing the drift and seeing the growth and those kinds of things are good ideas. In general, you just want to avoid going into the clouds in a way that you can't see. So always wisping, 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 right? Letting yourself like keeping the 45 rule. And then for me, sometimes like I'll let myself get close enough to the cloud that I might even have to backtrack a little bit to go around the cloud, right? But I'm
Mm.
always, as I'm climbing, I'm keeping a 45 rule for the exit that I know. Even if the exit that I know is slightly up course line, right? If I'm in real strong climb, like i.e. above 3.5 meters a second, I will keep taking that climb and keep taking it, keep taking it. With the exit, I'm staring at the exit. I keep looking at the exit. I don't lose sight of the exit. The moment that the climb slows down to below 3, if I'm under clouds, it's like below 3, I'm going to turn and burn and get onto the edge of the cloud, try to find the liftiest line, right? One of
Yeah.
the hardest things about flying cloud streets is how do you know that you're connected to it? And the white room is a great example of, oh, I'm definitely connected to the cloud street, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes we get a
yeah.
little scared and we're like, oh, the cloud is kind of close and the climb is really strong, and you leave it, but you're not quite, you can leave a couple thousand feet between you and the cloud. So
Hmm.
as a progression, right, in paragliding, right, you're early on in your career here, like take it bit by bit, get a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer, right? But in
That last
general,
climb I did, if I had just turned like two times and then gone on bar, I probably would have been okay and been able to use it to my full advantage without going into it.
yeah, yeah. And they are an advantage, and I want you to be able to use the advantage that you have here. Um, Also, in general, as with everything in paragliding, don't panic. If you get totally white roomed, um, hold your heading, hold full speed, and like keep the glider over your head. I tend
Hmm.
to stare at my instrumentation to keep myself from being dizzy. But the problem with the white room is you can really lose orientation and get vertigo really quickly. And then you don't actually know when to pull the brakes to keep the glider from shooting, that kind of thing. The thing I don't recommend at all is people try to spiral away from clouds. Because if you're near clouds, you're really in the strongest part of the lift. Spiraling is not a sustainable thing. If you
Hmm.
want to pull an asymmetric collapse on one side and then spiral the other way, which is a descent technique that I've made videos about, that is more reasonable, but full on spiraling away from clouds is not a thing. You got any questions about the
Yeah,
cloud flying bit?
no, that definitely makes sense. And the spiraling always did sound kind of counterintuitive to me also, because if you're, if the climb is strong enough, like you're just not going to be making much progress and you're pulling a bunch of G's.
Well, it's like the question is like, how do you get to the clouds? You find lifting air and you do circles in it. How do you get away
Yeah.
from the clouds? You just do circles wherever you are. No, 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 no. No. Push full speed, stay, keep your heading, fly until you find sync, core the sync. That's how you go down in cross country. That's the down button. The up button
Yeah.
is doing coring lift. The down button is coring sync. It's just, okay, ready? Let's
Sounds
continue.
good.
Okay, you're still going up here, and it looks like your max altitude was something over 1,800 meters, which is really not that high for us here in Oregon. Okay. You have a long final. Oh, he's turning. Oh, he's turning.
Yeah, that was me skirting around the space.
Oh, the airspace. Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. You're responsive. Responsive and responsible. Oh, that was a couple turns in sync. No beeps. Turn when it
Yeah,
beeps.
I was a little shaken there, I think, and I was just trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Been there. Okay, decent final glide though. Right next to a neighborhood, and you put it down right at the junction.
Hmm.
Okay, great. Safe landing. Nice flight, Jake. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Thanks.
Solid. Okay, couple things. Okay, so I want to answer your question. I'm going to stop screen sharing here. I want to answer your question about flatland flying. Okay, and to begin, I would just simplify cross country by saying that you turn circles in lift until you get to the top of lift, and then you point it in the direction that you want to go, and you glide the direction that you want to go until you either safely land or you find another climb. Okay. We can add a layer of complexity there and say when you get to the top of lift, you push half speed bar and you go the direction that you want to go until you either safely land or you find another climb.
Hmm.
Okay. So additional layers of complexity are I'm going to get to the top of the climb and I'm going to go the direction that I want to go, which is downwind, like 95% of the time. Right.
Hmm.
And I'm going to go exactly downwind and I'm going to use speed to fly. And I'm going to like more speed when I'm sinking and less speed when I'm climbing. Right. I'm going to do these things. Okay. The flats, you get relieved of having to look for triggers all the time. Right. Hopefully, if you're flying the flats, you can kind of stay off of the ground. When we're in the mountains, the terrain is so relevant. And the where we want to fly because we think we'll find a climb is much more obvious. In the flats,
Mhm.
it's almost like you could almost think of it as luck, right? It's like if there's a complete total desert, like if you think about the playa, right? You go flying across Burning Man, what are you going to like pick a crack in the ground and go fly over the
Right.
crack? Is it going to work? No, no, no. You just glide the way that you're trying to go and you'll run into it or you won't, right? So, like at some level, like at the most basic level, we just want to like fly the direction that we want to fly from as high as we could get. And we want to fly as straight and efficient as we possibly can until we either find it or we don't.
Mhm.
Okay. And like having that resolve inside of yourself is really helpful. Like, I'm going to live to fly another day. The days that are really cranking, like it's almost like you can't get to the ground if you tried. Right. So, additional layers of complexity there. It's like, honestly, here's the thing, Jake. I've found climbs off of the green watered fields in the middle of the giant desert. Right. So sometimes it's like difference that makes the trigger. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
like a power line. Sometimes it's like the highway. Right. So the typical things that oh, it's hot. Oh, look, those black buildings. Let's go fly over those. Or like, those are all triggers, which are lower in your cognition than signs, right? Signs are dust devils, birds, dust, haze domes, clouds, trash in the air, other pilots is number one on that list,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
if you can, as you're gliding, stay really super aware to the signs. Oh, where's the air moving? Okay, I can see a flag over here and it's blowing this way, and the flag over there is blowing the other way. Maybe there's something between those two flags. Why is it? Maybe it's in training this way, right? So there's all kinds of signs that you're looking for. Stay observant. And in general, just go the way that you're trying to go. Okay. This will allow you to stretch your glide out further because that's what you really need to do. You need to maximize the ground you can cover because if you're just going to get lucky, then just like maximize the ground that you're going to cover because you're going to find in your paragliding career that you're lucky as fuck, man. You're born where you were. You are who you are. You're lucky to be in paragliding. You're lucky to be flying today. You're lucky to have a girlfriend. You're lucky for all these fucking reasons. Every time you glide, you're just like, fuck, I glide. I'm gliding, right? If you're gliding,
I
it
like
means that you
that.
fucking climbed. So it's like,
You're already winning.
you're already winning, dude. So another thing is like look down course line. What is a reasonable LZ? And you just say, you know what? I'm going to fly towards that LZ. As you fly towards it, you can let your cognition stop worrying about where am I going to land? Where am I going to land? Where am I going to land? Once you actually deal with that, you say, okay, no, I'm going to land there. If I'm not more than 2,000 over that field, by the time I get there,
Mhm.
I'm just going to circle and I'll just land there. Okay, that's fine. So that's off of your mind. Now, as you glide, you can say, okay, let's be efficient. Okay. Then you're stuck on efficiency. Okay. Then the next layer is like, okay, if I could change my course ever so slightly to increase my odds of finding a climb, where would I go? And sometimes you'll see, well, it might actually be past that LZ that I want to fly over that neighborhood, right? Like you flew right to the edge of a neighborhood. I would, try to fly out over the neighborhood, see if you can like get
Mhm.
it off the streets and the houses and stuff. But
Yeah.
in general, it's like the flatland flying at a beginner level, you could almost say it's random. Just try to fly as far as you can and then
Mhm.
turn when it beeps. Like it's just almost like that, man. And
Yeah.
like I've flown lots of 300K flights where it's just like all day you're like Cloud Street, Cloud Street, Cloud Street. And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, where's it gonna? I don't know. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's going up right here and I turn. I don't get it. Right. I don't need to understand it all, but it's like I just
Yeah.
turn when it beeps. Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe there's someone out there who's like, when people speak so confidently about what thermal triggers are, I'm like, well, they're kind of like this is a priest and he's talking about the realm of myth, right?
Yeah. I've definitely picked that up, like listening to people talk. It's like, oh yeah, I caught this thermal off of like a shed or something,
Yeah,
in a
exactly.
giant field. So you don't know what's coming off of that.
Exactly. I just turn when it beeps. I actually don't even care where it's coming off of. I just turn when it beeps. Okay.
Yeah.
So the flatland flying is kind of like that. The same thing with downwind that you're trying to like straighten your track log. You're also trying to like straighten out for downwind, right? And you can
Hmm.
maximize your downwind by like making slight variations to your heading and watch your ground
Hmm.
speed, right?
Hmm.
Your ground speed's like 54, 53, 52. You're like 54, 55, 57, 56. You're like, there it is, 57. You're like,
The
so
sweet spot.
the sweet spot. And downwind is always your Hail Mary, right? You're always going to like be able to cover the most ground downwind, and you have the best chance of catching a thermal if you can glide as far as possible. So
Mhm.
instead of putting it all in your head that like, oh, I have to like think about something. I have to know something to like catch the next climb. It's not always
Mhm.
like that. Sometimes you just have to fly efficiently. Stay committed, stay calm, stay with it, right? Be grateful. Shake it off like you're lucky. I glided, I'm gliding, right?
Mhm.
Also, like slight variations of terrain, all of the things you know about thermal triggers, you know about thermal triggers. So you're going to use those, right? So if you can maximize your glide and you're like, okay, I want to maximize my glide so that I can kind of fly over the highway a little bit more. And if it kicks off the highway, then great. And if it doesn't, then I'll land safe, right? Do you got any follow up
Yeah,
questions there?
it's
Did we answer all the questions?
um so when it came time to land, I was strongly considering flying over that town, and I had LZs, ahead of me in the middle of the town. There was this big high school with a bunch of sports fields. And one of the reasons I didn't commit is because there was a soccer game or a baseball game happening on every single one of those fields.
Yeah.
And normally I would have taken that risk, but it was so windy. It was like
Oh,
10
this is
miles
the.
an hour, gusting 20 to 25.
Mm,
And I saw that on my ground speed. Occasionally I look down and I'm going like 65, which is fast for my B wing.
totally.
So
Totally.
I just figured I'd quit while I was ahead, and I was already stoked on the day. And I saw this big giant field to land in. So I don't know. It's just, how do I pick that limit?
Okay. Ballpark your landing time for me.
It was early in the day. I launched
2
like 11
p.m. before
o'clock.
2 p.m.
Yeah, before two. It was like 1:30, I think.
Okay. You launched at noon. You flew for an hour and 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So XC wind tolerance. Where is the wind a concern?
I mean, really just at the ground.
Right. Two
And I
reasons.
felt the shear as I went down. Up high, it wasn't that bad, but as I got lower, I felt it getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah. So this is valley wind. Okay. There's two reasons why I don't want the wind. I don't want the wind, one, because it blows the thermals apart and then I
Mm-hmm.
can't climb. Okay? But if I find myself in a day where I'm climbing just fine and there's lots of wind,
Mm-hmm.
then my only concern left is how am I going to land? Okay. A lot of times out here in the American West, I launch off Pine Mountain and I get 40K down course line. The full 2 p.m. kicks in. There's 3,000 foot tall dust devils. There's fucking wind whipping across the ground. I can see the dirt just flying down the ground. My best bet is to stay in the sky.
Yeah.
And there have been many days where I have just been like, do not land. Like, I will sit here and circle in zeros for 2 hours if I have to,
Mm-hmm.
just to let this shit calm down on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the sky, it's not a problem to be in the wind in the sky. But every time you're in the wind, if the wind picks up in the air and you notice the wind changing in the air, you can expect that it's going to have an effect on your capacity to catch a climb. Okay. It's going to blow the climb apart and or make it really, really hard to follow. Right. Especially if there's a bunch of wind and you get downwind of it and you're fucked. It's like, okay, it's like you miss one and you're on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're wise to keep an eye on it, but also like you're trying to keep an eye on what's happening on the ground. The ways you
Mm-hmm.
can do this are signs, right? Like if you look down, you see a big flag at a fucking car dealership and it's like fully standing erect, you're like, oh God, right? If you can see dust blowing on the ground, if you can see wind on water, right? These are all ways that you can look down and be like, that is not a great sign for me. If you're really high, then going down course line is not a huge problem unless you're going into some terrain feature that's going to make the wind worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of times we fly in the Alps where it's like you cannot land in the valley today. And if you get low, you have to like stuff it into the freaking mountains and you have to land high because if you let yourself go into the valley, you're going to land going backwards, 35
Mm-hmm.
kilometer an hour wind, right? But it can
Mm-hmm.
be a totally flyable day, 1,000 meters off of the valley floor. But as long as you know that and you're like, okay, no, I have to land at the top of the ski resort and walk down today because I let myself fly in so much wind, it's like fair enough.
Yeah.
Another way that we do this though is like I'm relatively high bandwidth in a paraglider, meaning that I
Hmm.
can, like when I was guiding you in Mexico, like I can watch 5 people and be on the radio and eating a snack and taking a piss simultaneously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Matt Hinsey's also really good at this. And Revis, my friend Revis is like, Revis will
Hmm.
just come on the radio and be like, the wind is, and he reads out the wind observation because he just pulls it
Yeah.
up on his phone to look at
Right, right.
the ground. So as you
He was,
develop,
hey, and I heard him doing that. That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah, he does this. And it's a really good idea because it takes his concern in his head, which is, hey, there's a lot of wind on the ground. And he says, okay, let's go right towards it. Let's like, is there actually? Okay, it's reading like 16, gusting 28 on the ground.
Hmm.
You're like, okay, well, like it's no longer like an ethereal concern. Now we know there's a ton of wind on the ground. Or if it's like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe it's windy, like, oh, I just saw 75 on my ground speed. And you look and it's like it's 4 gusting 8. And you're like,
Hmm.
great, I don't need to worry about that right now anymore until I
Yeah.
have some other sign that tells me.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like I said, lots of wind in the air, no problem. It might make it hard to climb on the days that there's a lot of wind and the thermals stay together. Fucking go, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go. Those are the
Hmm.
days, man. Those are the days. There's also days where it's like the ground wind is light and up high, it gets nuking. Those are also the days I love those. I've
Hmm.
seen 107 kilometers an hour ground speed on my instrument, and I've seen over 100 kilometers an hour on a B. Um, and landed tiptoe both of those days, right?
Hmm.
So wind can be really high here, and mellow on the ground. It's no problem. Okay, so you got to be differentiating. Sometimes we get spooked and we're like, oh God, what is it? Is it actually a concern? Can we check it? Can we see? Do we have the bandwidth to like let go of the glider and like open wind alert and see the wind stations? That's not always an option. In general, we want to forecast days that's like it doesn't say that it's going to gust to 25 on the ground.
Hmm.
Right? We want days it's like in the middle of the day, it might gust to 15. And you're like, okay, gusting to 15, landing in gusts of 15. It's like, I can deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but in general, the best cross country days are relatively light wind that is stacked vertically and relatively consistent in direction.
Hmm.
Okay? Um, but I think that the most relevant thing here was that you saw landing zones possible, but you thought, ooh, with a lot of wind, that big football field gets real fucking small.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so true, man. Like from above, you're like, oh, it's a football stadium. I could land there. And you get there, you're like, oh my God, light poles. And you're like, oh God, is this only 100 meters? You're like, land, it's
Yeah.
a postage stamp. And especially with more wind, you get rotor, you get choppy shit, you get sink.
Hmm.
It's like, man, the windier it is, the more space you need.
Hmm.
Right. So you made a really good decision to put it down in a nice open field. Don't try to push it. Safe launch, safe landing is all you can hope for. Live to fly
Hmm.
another day, brother.
Yeah, man.
Love it, Jake.
Oh yeah. Thanks, dude.
Yeah, you're so welcome.